Blessings, everyone. Come on in. Come on in. Thank you all. Thank you all for taking the time out to join Broken Vessels podcast. This is your host, Latoya Washington, here with our special guest tonight, Kellan Fluckiger. We are so excited to have him here. So please be sure to share. I'm going to give you guys a second to go and do that, to hear this wonderful testimony of hope, redemption, and restoration. We are so grateful, so grateful. I pray you all had a blessed day and continue to support www.brokenvesselspodcast.com and subscribe, as well as our guest tonight, who has so many books that we're going to talk about tonight as well, as many as we can in the time allotted. But most importantly, I am so grateful for you all to just hear this testimony of all that God has brought Kellan through. And we are grateful. So, again, you guys, please be sure to share and welcome our wonderful, wonderful guest, Kellan, all the way from Canada.
Thank you. Grateful to be
Hallelujah.
here.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kellan. And so, as we talked about before, the weather is like fluctuating back and forth. You got a little snow.
Yeah, it was warm and nice yesterday, and today's snowing. So,
Yes, but we are hoping for that summer weather to come. I'm a summer baby myself, so I'm excited for the sandals and the beach and all of that. So, beautiful
absolutely.
beaches in your area, sir. You have beautiful beaches in
No, that
there.
we're landlocked. Alberta is land on every side, so there's no beach here except lakes. There's some lakes up north, but no beaches, no ocean here.
Well, I'm gonna send some sun your way. I mean, some sand your way virtually.
Suits me. I'd love it.
So, again, for those tuning in to Broken Vessels podcast, we have our special guest, Kellan Fluckiger, here from Canada. And he is a author as well as a coach, and a former executive as well. And he's going to touch on that testimony slightly as well tonight in the time allotted. But I'm so grateful for his testimony. Before we get started and all that you're doing, around the world and all the conversations with the many people that you've been blessed to coach and encourage and uplift. Tell us a little bit about Kellan.
Well, the Kellan you see before you now, I'm 66, is quite different than the one you would have seen when I was 52. At 52 in 2007, I had an abrupt transition, a divine intervention, because I had made a mess out of my own life. I lived for decades with depression. I was raised in a two-parent home, but with a lot of, quote, religious discipline that today would be felony child abuse, a lot of, beating and that sort of thing. And in those days, millions of years ago, because I'm 66, it was, there was nowhere to go, nobody to talk to, and you sort of lived that. I remember getting dressed even in high school last in the PE locker room because I didn't want anyone to see that I was black and blue, because I was embarrassed, like I was ashamed of that sort of thing. And I left home at 17 and figured that I was just not okay, and lived that way all of my adult life. I never talked to anyone. I created big success career-wise, executive, blah, 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 in the United
Mhm.
States and Canada. But I lived this roller coaster of big success, self-sabotage, and some of these valleys included, addictions and alcohol and drugs and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up sadly married and divorced 3 times, in and out of rehab, and at the same time, huge success. So on the outside, it looked like whoop-de-doo, and behind the scenes, there was this disaster, kind of like you see in movies. I've had more than one person tell me, "Holy crap, is somebody going to make a movie out of this?" That sort of complete high-functioning addict behind the scenes disaster. So I did
Wow.
that for 35 years, in and out of, like I said, 3 marriages and many career positions, until in 2007, I had a divine intervention that was abrupt and sudden and changed all direction. In the last 14 years, I built a coaching practice, written 16 books and blah, 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 a bunch of stuff. But my goal right now is just to help people discover who they really are as divine beings and to create a
Mhm.
beautiful life serving with their divine gifts. And that's all I do.
Awesome, awesome. And how long have you been coaching so far?
Well, after that, change in 2007, I walked away from everything and I tried to figure out what to do. And I began realizing that the gift that I had developed during my years was to help people do things they thought were impossible, hard stuff. So
Mhm.
I thought, what is that? I think that's coaching. So I went and explored, some coaching programs and began building at that time. So I've been either building or creating this practice for the last 12 years or so, really intensely, probably the last 6 or 7,
Mhm.
and have created a clientele around the world and a lot of success. Uh, Blessed, of course, by the gracious rescue that I was provided, in the
Mhm.
invitation by our Father.
Amen. And I love that. We talked a couple months ago when we were, just getting to know each other through the pre-interview process. But I wrote so many things down that you said that just really stick to me today. Is that you said I had everything, but it still wasn't enough. And I just think that's so awesome to share how. As you said, you were an executive traveling all over the world, what we would consider money at buku money, but it still wasn't enough. Can you share a little bit more about that?
You bet. um, so the self sabotage kind of happened. I would create some big career success, like C-suite positions, so chief operating officer, and that level. I've testified before Congress. I had a contract with the Queen of England. I mean, like really high profile stuff. But behind the scenes, I felt unworthy. I don't deserve to have this. And so then I would engage in behaviors that eventually would sabotage either the marriage or the career position. And so I ended up having to change career positions 3 or 4 times. And I was making enough money just before the divine intervention in 2007 that the $3,000 a week cocaine habit that I had didn't matter. I was making that much money and wasting it in that fashion. All those
Wow.
resources that I could have done something good with, I was wasting it on silly things because I was so empty. And I guess the way to describe it is, you can never get enough of what you don't need, because what you
Mm,
don't need won't satisfy you. And what we all need is love, service, kindness. We need to be doing good, adding good to the world, and stacks of cash and cars and houses and this and that. It's fun to have, but it's empty and it doesn't satisfy your soul because that's not how we're
yeah.
built as divine
Right.
beings.
Right, right. And the flesh is never satisfied. We just want to just keep feeding it, and it's just never enough. And $3,000, as we talked before, we could do so much with that. But even though your addiction may have been, drugs, there's so many people who are addicted to so many other things, position and titles and prestige. But it's still never enough. You can have job after job, title after title, but as you're saying, it still wasn't enough because there was issues internally that was I felt a void, or that just was empty. Thank you for sharing that.
You bet. I felt I didn't deserve it. So I created these things and I felt like I didn't deserve it. So I would wreck it. And then that by
Mm,
wrecking it, it would prove that I sucked as bad as I believed that I did in my heart. And then I would like, oh, I don't want to be here. I got to do this again. And so I'd go somewhere else and, you know, just this silly roller coaster. Sad, sad. I don't mean make to trivialize it because during that time I got
right.
so depressed that I attempted suicide a couple times. And, it was terrible until God intervened.
Yeah, and it's just I thank God that you at least recognized it. One of the saddest parts is as you continue to go down this roller coaster ride, as you said, you didn't notice that you were doing this to yourself or self sabotaging, and it took some honest self-reflection and that divine moment, as you said, where it's like God had to show you yourself, where you're playing a part in this cycle. I think that's important for us to be aware and acknowledge. What do you think of in concerning that?
Completely, because every single one of us, every one of you listening to this show, know that during our lives we feel those intuitions, those divine invitations to do things, and so often we ignore them, we blow them off, we downplay them, we say not now, yeah, and they're there and they will continue to be there, and our opportunity is to say yes, even if
Yeah.
we don't know exactly what it means, to lean in, to say, okay, what does this mean? What shall I do? Instead of ignoring things like I did for so long.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not healthy to ignore it either, because it's going to have a profound effect on your life, your spiritual walk, your those connected to you, because I know even those around you, they were affected by your behavior as well.
Well, I was completely alienated from my family of origin. I was off the Christmas card list, so to speak. Nobody talked to me. Once in a while, I would talk to my mom, but she had no idea what was going on. My brothers and sisters were, ostracized, and I was literally alone. I had
Mhm.
no one. One of the things that's so important is to take the opportunity to talk to people and get help, counselors, people at church, somebody. But I didn't do that for all those years. When I left home at 17 until I was 52, I never talked to a soul about
Mhm.
what was going on inside of me. I put on a facade. I did what I thought I was supposed to do, but I never sought help for my own mess. I just
Yeah.
kept believing if I just keep, pushing forward, and eventually, of course, that crashes.
Yeah, yeah. And so one thing that you shared a couple months ago, and you brought it up a couple times tonight, is that you tried to kill yourself twice. But not only that, you died and came back, and you were in a coma for 2.5 weeks. Tell us about that period.
Well,
It's just
so let me
my
let me set
God.
the stage. Yeah, no, that happened too, but that was a blessing. That
Yeah.
wasn't part of the wake up. So, the suicide attempts were in the years just before the divine intervention. The divine intervention was an event that happened in August of 2007. I got home from work on a Friday night, and I was getting ready to go party for the weekend, like I always did. And before I went out, I was single. I was living with 4 of my 10 children. They were teenagers. They took care of themselves. I was going to go party for the weekend. And before I went outside or went to go, I felt like I needed to turn on the TV. So I did. I went to do it and picked up the remote and realized I didn't know how, because that had some electronics guy come in, put in big, cool stuff. But I never watched TV. So I looked at the remote and I'm like, ooh, okay. And I had to have one of my kids, my 16-year-old daughter came in and she punched some buttons and threw it at me, dipweed. So it landed on a program that I'd never heard of, but I didn't watch TV, so I'd never heard of any of them. And the name of the program was Intervention. Now, those of you that know that that's a reality TV show about people who stage interventions for busted loved ones. So I watched about 10 minutes of it, and the protagonist was a high-ranking executive with a cocaine problem. So I'm watching myself on the screen. I'm like, yeah, I'm not watching this crap. So I turned it off and I did some more stuff and I was getting ready to go out. And then I felt like I just had to turn the TV back on. So I picked up the remote. Now, this time I knew how. So I turned it on and that program started over in the middle of the hour. No, I don't have a DVR. No, it wasn't on the schedule. No, it can't do that. I got it, but it did. So I'm freaked out. I'm like, okay, holy crap. I guess I'm supposed to watch this. So I watched it. It went badly. The guy yelled at his family, stomped out, refused help, the drill. And, but it freaked me out so much that I didn't go out. I went to bed. And when I went to bed, I went to hell. Now,
Mm.
what I mean by that, and this was the wake up call, I went to a place that felt like I was out of body in a big theater. It was dark. And on the stage, all of the scenes of my life focused on the suffering sort of played out, from the beatings and suffering that I experienced as a kid up through all the suffering I'd inflicted on other people as an addict and, all the stuff in my life. And It was the most horrific feeling of suffering I'd ever experienced. And after a while, a long time, a voice said, "It is enough." I woke up and the sun was shining in the window, which was weird because the windows faced west. And I got up and I realized it was 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon. And I thought, holy crap, I've been somewhere for nearly 18 hours. And I thought I've been invited to change. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no idea how to do this, but I'm done. So I quit cold turkey that day in 2007. The other piece of that divine intervention was 2 weeks later. I hadn't quit and walked away from my jobs yet, which I knew I needed to do, but I was like figuring out what to do. I used to get free stuff as an executive position. They give you free stuff. Other companies do because you make decisions and they want to be nice and all stuff. One of the things I got was a pair of tickets to see a concert. Yo-Yo Ma, if you know classical music, you know who that is. Oh, and if you don't, that's fine. But he's like way up there. So I thought, all right, well, it'd be a shame to waste this other ticket. Like, right, I'm single. I don't know. And so I asked in the groups that I managed who likes classical music. And some lady said, I do. And so I looked at her and I said, have I ever given you anything before? She said, no. I said, okay, fine. See you there. So I gave her the ticket. We met at the venue. The concert was spectacular. And halfway through, I got to remember, I'm 2 weeks stone cold sober at this time. Halfway through, I had this feeling come over me that I recognized from 2 weeks earlier. And I'm like, okay. And this voice said in my mind, you need to marry this woman. And I said, you're insane. I screwed that up 3 times officially and some other messes in between, not happening. And later that night, we were backstage because they were backstage passes. And the voice came back and said, yeah, comma, and you need to tell her tonight.
Wow.
So I flipped out and argued because like she could have me arrested, like harassment. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. But you don't win those arguments. So I did. And it went about like you would have expected. I mean, I didn't even know if she had a boyfriend. I don't know. But she didn't have me arrested. So that was the good news.
That's a good thing.
Within 2 weeks, she had her own set of experiences. She walked away from her career. I walked away from millions of dollars in contracts. We walked off into the sunset together. And 4 months ago, we celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary. So
my God,
as crazy as that story is, love story and everything else, the reason it's important is because she was the angel sent to help me deal with the depression, the self-loathing that I had never talked to anyone about. She helped me learn how to be a person, how to have a friend, how to be a friend, how to tell the truth. She found me counselors to talk to and on and on and on. And the fun part, her name is Joy.
Oh.
Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? And so that was the turning point. Now, the near-death experience you talked about happened 11 years later, 2018. So I'd been writing books and doing the best that I could to be to change life and all the rest for 10 years. And Joy and I went on a cruise. We'd never been on a cruise before, so we went. And at the end of it, I got sick. And when we got home, I didn't go get attention right away. I kept thinking it would go away, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I got sick on Monday. So by Friday, I thought it's not getting okay. I need to go to the doctor. So I went to a walk-in clinic. And they wouldn't let me in. They took one look at me and said, yeah, we can't help you. Get out of here. Go to the ER right now. So I did. And in 10 minutes, I was in a private room. I mean, emergency is like an hour, 2, 3. I thought, oh, this is not good. I didn't even know they had private rooms in the ER. So anyway, bottom line is things went downhill from there. And that night, my heart stopped. I died. And when that happened, I came to spiritually in a gray room. I was horizontal like I was in the intensive care. And the room is all gray, but over my left shoulder, I could see a door. And I wanted to be at that door. And so then I was standing at the door and I'm leaning on the door jamb on my right shoulder. And I noticed on the other side of the door, it was white. My side was gray and that side was white. And I thought, okay. And there was someone on the other side leaning on that door jamb. And he looked at me and said, "Do you want to come home?" And in about a millionth of a second, I knew who I was talking to, where I was, and what that all meant and everything. And so we talked about it for quite a while. And I finally said, we talked about everything I'd done and what had happened 10 years before and all that other stuff. And I finally said, I'm not done. Okay. So I'm quite sure that's when they were able to restart my heart. The next day, and I don't know how it was a day later, you just know that sort of thing. I'm back at the door, and we had another long conversation about what to do, what I was going to do, and some more things. And I had an experience that's like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, where some aliens beam some info down and they build a weird thing.
Yeah.
But I had this intense experience that was like that. I felt like if I hadn't been in a bubble, I would have been incinerated. But I came away with 4 important truths, and they're part of the books that I wrote about this. Number 1 is that we're all intentional divine creations. Really. Not maybe, not woo. Number 2, every one of us have gifts and talents that we were given. Number 3, we have a purpose and mission that we not only agreed to, but we were excited about before we came. And number 4, all the help we need is available from both sides of that door. And so I said, okay, since that's true, why do we mostly settle for crumbs? And I don't know if in the economy of heaven, brevity is a virtue, but the answer was 4 words. Because you don't believe. And I thought, oh, man. Okay, what can I do about that, right? And he said, oh, glad you asked. So then he gave me an entire framework that I wrote in a second book. I wrote the whole book about the experience in a book called Meeting God at the Door, Conversations, Choices, and Commitments of a Near-Death Experience. And then I wrote what he gave me in that second conversation in the book of Context. And what that has to do with anything is we live. I'm going to say this really slow because this might be the most important thing we do. We live in a context straitjacket, which is the collection of our beliefs and definitions and experiences, and it limits what we think we can have, what we think we can do, what we think we can be, right? And the truth is, it's of our own making. And so the real important thing is to learn to change the things we believe are possible with God's help, and to try new things. Listen to that intuition and inspiration. And that's the stuff that I wrote about in that book. It is a method, a system about how to play a game instead of fighting with our beliefs. And so then the last of the 3 conversations was the next day. And I was really excited. I came back to the door. I was jumping up and down. I was repeating all the stuff in my mind that I was going to write in that second book, blah, blah, blah. And we're back at the door, and he looked at me and he asked me one question. Are you sure? And I thought, what do you mean, am I sure? Am I stupid? Did I miss something? Am I biting off more than I can chew? Like, what do you mean? Am I sure? And so we talked about it for a while. And finally I said, yes. And he said, okay. And nothing was said, but the conversation ended with a finality that I knew we were done. So that was the end of those conversations. And then I was in a coma for another 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks total. And then I came out of that, and they told me after I got out of the coma that what I had, COVID, we talk about a 2 to 3% mortality rate, 2 or 3% people die. They told me what I had a 10-day kill rate of 100%.
Wow.
In other words, of course you died. It kills people, right? That's it. And so that was a gift, a blessing, a choice to come back and to live only with one purpose. And that's to help every person I can understand who they really are and what's really possible by leaning into and living with their divine gifts.
Yes, yes. So again, I just thank you, Kellen, so much for any new books that you have coming out or anything like that that you're working on for those tuning in or who catch the
Yes,
replay.
I just finished a book in December. It'll be out in about 2 weeks. And the name of that book is Forgiveness, A Journey of Courage to a Place of Freedom and Power. And it talks about the role that forgiveness plays, unburdening our souls, no longer letting past events, whether we did dumb things and we can't forgive ourselves, or whether people did things to us. For me, there was just boatloads of guilt and shame and self loathing because of who I had been. And I couldn't forgive myself for a long time. And with other people, it is bad things that have been done to them. Well, as long as we carry those rocks, we can't be fully the people God intends us to be and do the things we have to do. So that's why I wrote that book. All of the books that I've written have come out of my own learnings and experience. And so that's the one that was most recently finished.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So, for those tuning in, please be sure to visit www.kellanfluckiger.com and purchase his books. Also, sign up for any coaching programs that he may have as well. I know he's going to drop some nuggets and some gems for those who participate in the coaching program. Truly a blessing, Kellan, truly a blessing. So, if there's anything else that you would like to share before we head out tonight.
There's something that I took me a long time to learn, and I want to share it with your listeners because often we get the feeling that it's too late. We've done too many dumb things. Our time has passed. Our opportunity has passed. We're just not worth the effort. I
Hmm.
want to assure you, I mean, if there was ever a candidate to be left at the bottom of the canyon, you know, I'm the poster child. It is never too late. It is never beyond hope. It is never impossible to learn to lean into your divine gifts, to have a big impact, to make a difference, and to have a joyful life by discovering, developing, and serving with those gifts and talents that you've been given. Living in love and forgiveness and creativity and prosperity is really and truly possible, no matter where you've been, no matter where you are right now.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And again, for those tuning in and for those who catch the replay, please visit www.kellanfluckiger.com to support all that he is doing, as well as get that book. I can't wait to get the book about forgiveness. I think that's going to be a blessing to many of us who struggle in that area. But again, thank you, Kellan, and thank you all for tuning into Broken Vessels Podcast. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you for having me, Latoya.
You welcome.